issue of trade and on defence, we have some of the toughest controls anywhere in the world for selling defence equipment to other countries. I don't think that trade is wrong in every circumstances. After all, how can we expect a small country to manufacture and make all the things it needs to defend itself? One of the countries I went to, and one of the countries where we have sold defence equipment in the past and probably will in the future, is Kuwait, a country that actually does have a level of democracy, and also a country that was invaded by its neighbour Saddam Hussein. So I don't accept this argument that it's wrong in all circumstances to support the sale of defence equipment. But as I say, Britain, unlike many other countries, has extremely tough controls. And as for whether there is evidence about this equipment has been used, I haven't seen that evidence. So I disagree, I think, with most parts of that question. Okay, fair enough, fair enough. We'll move on. The next question is a text question. It's on a similar line. They're going back and using Yugoslavia as an example to compare to Libya. In 1999, NATO bombed Yugoslavia because Yugoslav security forces were responsible for crimes against humanity and massive human rights abuse against the cost of our civilian population. Doesn't the UK, as a founder of NATO, find Libya's authorities are doing the same thing? Well, let me be clear. I think what Libya's authorities are doing is completely unacceptable. This violence, this meting out of vicious, brutal repression, including using aeroplanes, including troops on the streets, including live ammunition, is completely unacceptable, and it must stop. And I completely back what Barack Obama said last night about this. And these actions, yes, they must have consequences. Consequences in the UN Security Council, consequences for those responsible for them. And we should, as Barack Obama said, look at the full range of options in terms of doing that. And people in Libya need to think extremely carefully about what they are doing, because those actions, yes, they should have consequences. So in relation to that question, you wouldn't draw any parallels between intervention in Yugoslavia years ago and intervention in Libya? I would condemn human rights abuses and the repression against, by governments of their people wherever they happen, Libya included, and all our minds at the moment are focused on that country, and quite rightly so. And what we've seen on our television screens, what is happening on the streets of Tripoli and elsewhere, is completely unacceptable, and it must stop. And as I'm absolutely clear, and if it does not stop, there will be consequences. Okay then, one more international question before we move to domestic issues.
I want to ask Mr. David, my question will be about England strategy. Why you, democracy, do not expect the winning of Islamic parties in Arabic countries' elections?
Right, the audio wasn't brilliant on that one, but he was essentially saying, why are you not engaging more? Breaking into programming here on Al Jazeera, a White House press briefing from Jay Carney.
Legal and other actions needed to put a stop to violence against civilians in Libya. He will also discuss and undertake to address the significant humanitarian needs created by this crisis. The United States is involved in ongoing negotiations today at the UNSC, the UN Security Council, on a resolution that could include a weapons embargo, individual sanctions against key Libyan officials, and an asset freeze. Finally, the United States is utilizing the full extent of its intelligence capabilities to monitor the Gaddafi regime's actions, and we are particularly vigilant for evidence of further violence or atrocities committed against the Libyan people. With that, I'd like to take your questions. Ben.
Thanks, Jay. Obviously a lot there. Let me go back to what you said at the top about unilateral and multilateral sanctions. Can you just describe them a bit more? What are we talking about here when you mean sanctions?
Ben, we're finalizing the sanctions that we will pursue. Rather than enumerate them, I can tell you that they will be finalized soon, and you will know specifically what we're going to do. I think the universe of effective sanctions is pretty well known, the kinds of things that we're considering. So, you know, a lot of that has been discussed, but I don't want to specify which ones now because we're still just finalizing those, and we'll get them to you soon.
Finalizing today or in the coming days? Or
in the near future.
Can you explain what gives the United States confidence that sanctions work against someone like Gaddafi and his regime?
We are initiating a series of steps at the unilateral level and the multilateral level to pressure the regime in Libya to stop killing its own people. This is a first step, and obviously we continue to review our options going forward, and the steps that we take in the near future are not the only steps we're prepared to take if other steps are necessary.
Gaddafi today, or in the last few hours, was calling on his followers to continue fighting protesters. Militias that were loyal to him were still gunning down protesters. So I guess I'm wondering, as these things unfold, how is it that sanctions, as you see it, directly can affect that kind of inciting of his people to continue to kill?
Sanctions, targeted sanctions that affect the senior political leadership of a regime like Libya have been shown to have an effect. We are also, as I mentioned, pursuing actions that will ensure that the perpetrators of violations of human rights are held accountable. And there is certainly a history of those kinds of perpetrators being held accountable in the international community. And again, we will take these substantial actions and leave other potential actions on the table and evaluate as we go.
Thanks.
Jay, thank you.
Yes.
At the top, you mentioned the U.S. Embassy in Tripoli has been withdrawn. Is that right? Have you evacuated?
It has been shuttered.
Okay. The power of sanctions to stop violence immediately is pretty weak. What other steps, more forceful steps, could you take? How quickly could they come? Would more steps have to wait until Secretary Clinton goes to Geneva on Monday, for instance?
Well, let me just say that there has never been a time when this much has been done this quickly. The United States has acted in concert with our international partners and with great deliberation and haste. I know that in the past few days it's sometimes been frustrating when you've been able to question American officials about what we're doing and maybe haven't gotten all the answers you want. I discussed this with the President just a few hours ago, or an hour ago. The focus that he has is on our obligation to the security of American citizens and also getting the policy right. And I can assure you that that has been those have been the guiding principles as we've proceeded over the course of the last week.
Just to follow, there's been reports that opponents of Gaddafi have taken control of some parts of Tripoli. What is your sense of events there today, and do you believe that Gaddafi is still in control of the capital?
Well, I don't want to be in a position of giving a play-by-play commentary on very dramatic events happening quite a long way away that we're all watching on television. What I can say is that it's clear that Colonel Gaddafi has lost the confidence of his people. He is overseeing the brutal treatment of his people, the fatal violence against his own people, and his legitimacy has been reduced to zero in the eyes of his people. So that's what I'll say about him.
Just one more thing. Does the President agree with French President Sarkozy that Gaddafi must leave?
We have always said that that is a matter for the people of Libya to decide. But I would repeat what I just said, and because it is a matter for the people of Libya to decide, I think it is also clear that the people of Libya have expressed that his continued use of deadly violence, his clear violations of human rights, are totally unacceptable anywhere in the world. And the status quo is simply neither tenable nor acceptable. The Libyan people deserve a government now that protects the safety of its citizens, is responsive to their aspirations, and is broadly representative. Yes, Jake.
Colonel Gaddafi does not seem all that tethered to reality right now, in particular. He's been accusing, he's been, and experts on Gaddafi say he actually believes that the protesters in the street have been fed hallucinogens. How does the United States deal with a government? This isn't your typical dictator losing power. This is a man who, by many accounts, seems to be legitimately unstable and perhaps willing to burn the house down with him. How does that affect the policies that you go forward with?
Well, Jake, we make our policy decisions based on some key principles, as you know, that I've enunciated, the President has enunciated, and others. And we evaluate the circumstances in this case, Libya. It's not about personalities. It's about the expression of, the peaceful expression of the dissatisfaction of the people of Libya with their leadership. And we support them in their and their aspirations. But the actions we are taking, I think, in many ways answer your question. We are acting unilaterally and multilaterally in a way that we believe needs to be done to put pressure on the regime to cease this horrendous activity.
I understand that the decisions about the Libyan future and the Libyan government should be made by the Libyan people, but what's the end game here? How do you see this ending? In the best case scenario.
The best case scenario for any state in the region of the world is a government that treats its people well, that is responsive to the aspirations of its people, that includes its people in the political process in a democratic way, and that is a peaceful, responsible neighbor in its region of the world and in the international community. I mean, that's the.
How about in this actual situation?
I'm not going to plan out or predict for you the day-by-day progression towards that goal, which is, which I believe is the goal that the Libyan people hold, as do we. This is obviously still a very, very fluid and dangerous situation in Libya, and a very fluid situation in the region. But the goal is very clear.
The last question. You mentioned that American intelligence was going to be working on this. Could you elaborate at all on that?
No, I can't.